to see you all, happy to be with you here. The last few days we've been busy with global justice now, and I want to use this opportunity to commend them for the good work they're doing for many, many of us who believe that our countries must own or have a greater share of ownership of our resources. We must control our land, we must control our seed, we must control our food for the well-being of the majority of our citizens. Now, Pan-Africanism, that great exciting term. The party I belong to, I chair at the moment, is a product of the Pan-African movement. So we define ourselves as a Pan-Africanist party, first and foremost. And very often people ask, what is Pan-Africanism? For many of us, it's an objective. It's an objective. It is, or it offers rather, a way towards freedom. Freedom from poverty, freedom from economic marginalization, freedom from injustice, freedom to create wealth for Africans. It is also not just an objective for liberation, but also for connecting with Africans, not only on the African continent, but with Africans everywhere. Everywhere. One of the consequences of colonialism, of slavery, was our balkanization, our fragmentation. So if we want to reverse the consequences of colonialism and slavery, then it automatically means that we have to get back together again, to think together, to plan our economies, and to work together to fulfill or to provide, at the very least, the basic needs of many of our people. Clean drinking water, adequate power supply, basic access to health, basic education, and so on. So it is an instrument for our Renaissance revival. Now, Pan-Africanism, as you know, started outside the African continent, not inside. Early 20th century began with intellectuals, with great thinkers. And then by mid-century, emerging independence leaders in Africa came in contact with those great thinkers in North America, Caribbean. And with our early independence period, Pan-Africanism moved to African soil. And we began the process of institutionalizing it, to institutionalize Pan-Africanism by creating the Organization of African Unity, which is now the AU. One particular country, and I'm proud to say, I emerged out of that country, particularly played a very strong role in beginning Pan-Africanism on African soil. And that is, of course, our base. You know, we always say Africans, we belong to many countries, but we have our base. So in my particular situation, my base is Ghana. Now Ghana, as we know, the first country under the Saharan desert to gain independence. And on the eve of independence, so just imagine this. This is the eve of independence, where people are thinking of, micro-nationalism. Just that your little corner. And Ghana became independence. And the leader of Ghana's independence movement, Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah, tells his people, the independence of Ghana is meaningless. Meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of the continent. I'm sure nobody understood exactly what he meant. Because right when you are thinking of Ghana's freedom, and you are saying, it won't be worth much. It cannot be sustained or consolidated without linking it with other Africans' freedom and unification. Do we understand the import of that statement? Do we understand it today? I don't think so. Ghana went on to prove by practice what we meant by that, by helping or spearheading assistance to many liberation movements. So immediately after independence, we had the first All-African People's Conference, the first All-African states, independent states conferences. We went on to help different liberation movements gain independence. And in 1960, we call it the golden year in Africa. 17 countries, boom, en masse, gained independence. Great years, the 60s, great hopes. The objective of our independence was what? Because political independence was not an end in itself, was it? We didn't gain independence to hoist the flag or play our national anthem. We gained independence to improve the living conditions of our peoples, to regain our confidence as African people, as black people, to reconnect with our tradition and our culture, and to find solutions that are suited to our specific, culturally specific environment and conditions, to regain our dignity. But we got caught up in the Cold War, and we gained our political independence, but unfortunately we lost many of our patriotic, progressive leaders during the Cold War. Many who were eliminated or just taken out of the scene simply because in their quest for development, they turned not only to the West, but to the East for trade, for cooperation, and for solidarity. Come the 80s, even worse, a bigger calamity. The new liberal agenda was imposed on us in our efforts to try and industrialize or create or build our infrastructure. We went for loans, but the conditions imposed on us were severe. You must retrench labor. You must shrink the state, cuts in spending, cuts on investments in agriculture, health, education. So even though today, we were saying earlier, many of our countries enjoy a growth of about average of 6% over the last 20 years, but what we are having or seeing is jobless growth because we produce very little locally. or growth that is not inclusive. That is why in 2014, you find some communities of thousands without clean drinking water. Totally unacceptable. So Pan-Africanism in the 50s and 60s served to help us liberate ourselves from colonialism. And today it must free us from economic exploitation. So the next phase, or this rather phase of our struggle, is how to slowly and gradually gain control over, or a greater share of ownership of our resources, natural and mineral. How we can become decision makers of the economic path we must pursue. An independent African economic development path, not accepting the dictates of institutions, not submitting to the dictates and conditionalities of international financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, which have not worked because we've been pursuing them since the 80s and they have not delivered. The time has come to say they have not delivered. And if you are sick and you keep on taking the same medicine for over 30 years and you don't get well, what do? Do you continue taking that same medicine? Do you continue taking that same medicine that's not making you better? No, of course not. So I think the time has come for us to say no. But it is very difficult to say no if you are in isolation. You are talking about countries almost statelets, 6 million, 4 million, even 25 million, 30 million. How can you stand and bargain successfully with big blocks of not less than 300 people? China, India, the EU, the USA. How can you? So African countries need to plan